Today I'm speaking with Neil Bernstein. Neil, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure to be here.
And just for anyone who doesn't know Neil, probably that's very few, at least in the circles I tend to go in. Neil runs the YouTube channel called Neil the 604 Atheist, which we're going to ask about in a few minutes. Neil is also in a band called Luminous, and he's also the founder and director at a group that's currently on hiatus, but a group called Lifeblood Entertainment, which I want to ask about. So you're a busy guy, and I'm sure that's only touching the iceberg, the top of the iceberg of what you do. But could you tell us more about what you do, what you're up to, and what those mean? What does Neil the 604 Atheist come from, and what does Luminous come from, and what is Lifeblood Entertainment all about?
Well, there's some stories behind all those questions. First one's easy, though. Neil the 604 Atheist, actually, the 604 refers to the area code where I live.
Oh, nice.
I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and that was the original area code for this part of the world. So I just used it because I figured people may or may not know what it means. But a lot of people goes, what do they have? Like, what, they're like 603 atheists before you? Like, no, it's just the area code. So that's where that one comes from.
Very cool. And Luminous, what does that refer to, your band?
Well, when we first got together with not the current lineup, because my lead guitar player passed away a couple of years back. So we were going at first with the name. We didn't really have a name. We just used to get together and jam all the time. Figured, fuck it, let's record something, and we need a name. So we were going with Hunker Down because my guitar player Will heard the expression on the radio and he thought it was neat. We stuck with that for a few months. This is well before recording, and all of a sudden he goes, the name sounds kind of country. I don't know if we're not country, so we should probably come up with something else. So while we were recording, we didn't have the name. We were using Hunker Down, but we weren't going to keep it. And I looked over at one of the mixing boards or something that's had a thing on it said Threshold. I said, that's kind of cool. Let's go with Threshold. Will goes, yeah, that's actually pretty cool. Let's do that. So we opened up I don't know if you remember MySpace.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We opened up a MySpace page as Threshold. And that's when a little band from England, not so little, called Threshold actually threatened to sue us. Because they were using the name Threshold, and they have been since about 93, I guess. And they were just coming over to North America to start up their touring and stuff like that for their newest album. And they asked us if we could change our name. And I said, yeah, of course. So being into old languages at the time, I basically looked up some Latin words, trying to find out if we could find the word threshold on it. And it was there, but it was lame. But on the threshold was Luminous, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I told Will, and he's like, yeah, let's do that. I doubt anyone else will be using it. So let's do that. Right.
Hopefully.
That's well, funny. Yeah. I never found another band with the name, a theater, but that was it.
Yeah. That's awesome. And what do you do in the band?
Well, I'm the vocalist, actually.
Nice. I
play some instruments, but nowhere near the talent level of the other guys in the band. So I'm like, fuck it, I'll just sing. So
that's awesome. Do you ever do anything a cappella?
Have I? Yeah, I have. Yeah, gotcha. I have in the past. Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, I'm looking forward. I honestly have not seen your videos on your music, so I'm going to be looking those up when we're done, and looking forward to hearing you guys.
Oh, the old live videos are terrible.
Gotcha. I'm sure they're probably better than you think. I'll definitely enjoy listening to those. And what is Lifeblood Entertainment all about? I've read a little bit about it, but I'd love to hear from you the full story behind that. Sounds interesting.
Well, it's a big story, and there's more to it than that. My father was British Columbia's highest blood donor. He had before he passed away, he had 536 donations under his belt, which is pretty sizable. He was the record holder until fairly recently when some guy passed 700. So basically, I started a blood donor group in his name, like in his honor.
That's awesome.
The Frank Bernstein in honor of Partners for Life group, they call it. And when I went in there and told them that I wanted to do that, they said, well, you can do that, but you need to pledge a certain amount of donations for the year. And my father and I had always planned on donating together before all of this, but our schedules never connected, so it just never happened. But in 2012, I decided, yeah, okay, let's do it. Let's start a Partners for Life group, and I'll get some news media people in there because I know a couple people. And I ended up with a whole bunch, like the Vancouver Sun, the Vancouver Province, the Global News. We had CTV News. We had a whole bunch of them in there, filming and writing stories about the whole endeavor that I was taking off. So I basically started the group, and they wanted me to make a pledge. And I said, well, I'm pretty sure we can probably beat his numbers if I get enough people. And they're like looking at each other, like with their eyes wide, like, is he serious? You know how many donations your father had? I go, yeah, I know. You think you can beat him? Most single person started Partners for Life groups can barely get to 50 in a year. I recommend you maybe put, a 50 as your threshold. And I'm like, well, you can write that down, but I'll guarantee you, with the presence that I have on the media, on the internet, and with people that I know in the media, we'll probably be able to do much, much better. I said, well, that'd be great, but we'll put you down for 50 for the first year. So after the first year, basically we did 681 donations as a group, because I managed to recruit just under 200 people in the first year, which has never been done in Canadian history by a single person. So they got me a cake, and they brought the news media back in. Awesome. And they said, yeah, here's your cake. And on the cake it said, congratulations on beating your pledge by 1,240%. Nice. They said this is just unfounded. They said it's never happened before. So
what a great service to the community. Thank you for doing that. That's awesome.
Oh, my pleasure, man. And I really wish I could have been able to do it with my dad. But where lifeblood comes into this is the guy that was my drummer at the time said, hey, why don't we start up a company where we put on music shows with bands, like 3 or 4 bands at a time, little music fests. And in between sets, we can talk about the necessity for blood donations and have people sign up to your group and stuff like that. I said, yeah, it's a great idea. Let's do that. And Canadian Blood Services liked the idea too. And they'd send some volunteers down to the shows, and they would sign people up, and we'd give door prizes away and shit like that. And we did a few shows, and then somebody got ill. So we had to kind of put it on hiatus, and it's been on hiatus for a little while. My old partner has moved away. And so I'm just sitting on it until I can financially get it going again, basically. Okay. So hopefully that'll be in the future. But
yeah,
right now it's all about the channel.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Well, I was going to ask you too about the channel. I know about your channel, but could you tell us a little bit more about kind of what motivated, like what it's all about, and what motivated you to get started, and maybe just kind of if you have any teasers of where it might be going in the future, if there's any changes coming up, or if there's anything that's on the radar.
Well, I don't know about changes, but the only change that I have made is that when I first started the channel, I do 3 days a week, and I was doing it Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. And then I got a call from Johnny Angel, who's one of the hosts of the nonprofits, the relaunch of the nonprofits through the ACA. And he asked me to be one of the hosts because, I went down to Texas for Faithless Forum and stuff, and met all the people that I very much admired who have channels like Genetically Modified Skeptic, Rachel Oates, Cosmic Skeptic, Prophet of Zod, people like that, Shannon Q, who spilt wine all over me. And when she saw me, and she ran over to give me a hug, and she was already pretty cut, so she had a wine glass, and it just went all down the back of my jacket. So now I get to smell like a wino forever. But
good story to tell them.
Yeah,
I saw you got to speak with Aaron Ra at one point too, right?
Yep. Oh yeah, I hung out with Aaron quite a bit actually, and which was a great idea because he always had beer. So nice. He always had like really good dark beer. So yeah, it was really cool hanging out with him. And we basically, after, it was only for the weekend, right? They only did the Faithless Forum for the weekend, but I stayed for the entire week and like an extra day or something. So I was hanging out. I was crashing over at Jamie Boone's place, who at the time was one of the co-hosts of Talk Heathen, and Eric Murphy. and hung out with those guys and just basically hung out with everybody. But we usually partied over at Matt's place, Matt Dillahunty's place. So over at his place and just hanging out there. And Matt, I'm not a big tequila fan, and Matt was trying to get me to try some of his really expensive tequila. And I should have tried it because, the only tequila I've ever really had has been trash, right? So, and it usually turns me into an asshole. So I tend to stay away from tequila. But I think next time I'm down there, which will be this summer, hopefully, I'm going to have to hit him up for that.
That's awesome.
Speaking of Matt, though, he'll be on my show actually next Thursday. So,
oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Sounds like you've been hanging out with all my heroes. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, they're they're great people. And, and every chance we get together for the big Faithless Forum and all that it's always a good time.
Yeah. Absolutely. I hope I can get to some of those events at some point. With four little kids, it's hard to get to too much at the moment, but and with COVID, but I think it'll change eventually, and I'll be able to get to a few of the events.
Oh yeah, for sure. Are you anywhere near Texas, or?
I'm not. I'm just above Atlanta, Georgia. So
okay.
It would be a drive. It would be doable, but it'd be a couple of days of driving there. I guess if I could probably fly down quickly, get it done, but. The kids are definitely the kind of kids that love road trips. They love seeing new things. It was hard when they're little. It's hard to get, kids don't like being in car seats, but when they get a little bit older, they can kind of take it. So I think we could probably manage a road trip with that and have some fun.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a great weekend for sure. Like if you go down for the weekend to check it out, it's really good.
Yeah. Well, for anyone who hasn't heard your show, could you just give a summary, like what it's all about and what got you started with what you do?
Sure. Well, my channel is pretty much dedicated to deconversion stories. I talk to people and hear their stories about how they found their way out of religious belief and stuff like that. And hopefully one day I'll have you on there too.
Yeah, I'd love
to. So I've also spoken to pagans because they went from an Abrahamic belief system over to paganism, like I did back in my old days. Like my very good friend Ocean Keltoy, who is a pagan as well, and I've spoken to quite a few of them. I felt that the pagan groups and atheists can band together for specific things against religious groups that are trying to, put harm out there to other bad ideas and stuff like that. So we can all fight against it together. So it's kind of like we have that bridge there where we can work together to put an end to that kind of shit. Because you don't often hear about pagans strapping dynamite to themselves and blowing shit up, or you just don't hear about that, right? Their beliefs are fairly solitary and they just do what they do out in the woods somewhere. Right?
Yeah. Or invading Capitol buildings.
Well, that's a whole other thing. I mean, the last time that happened, it was us Canadians coming down there to burn the place down. So
that's true. I appreciate you guys staying up this time. I was gonna say, you don't have I don't hear the whole A at the end of your sentences. So is that a part of Canada that doesn't say it versus it does?
It depends. It pops out of my mouth from time to time, but it's not I think it's overplayed.
Okay.
So, not everyone walks around and go, "Hey, how's it going, eh?"
Nice.
We don't do that or call each other hosers and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I do want to get into your story in a little bit, but I just, since we're talking about your channel, if you don't mind me throwing a few other questions, I was just curious, do you have some people that you bring on that are kind of still in the middle of it? Like I'm sure Pine Creek Doug, and some of the people that he's talking to they're not really out yet. They're just kind of questioning and maybe not even questioning, maybe just trying to have fun with banter with him. But do you find some people that you talk to are already, out, or some people kind of saying, "Hey, I'm not sure, but convince me one way or the other"?
I have not spoken to anyone that's still somewhat convinced.
Okay.
We'll say everyone I've spoken to either has some sort of paganistic belief, or they have come out of a belief system of some kind. Excuse me. I've also spoken to a friend of mine here in Vancouver. who used to be a guru for like woo and stuff like that, crystal healing and all that bullshit. So yeah, her name's Jessica Schaub. And she traveled the world as a guru in this sort of thing. And she finally realized that it was nonsense and got the hell out of there. And I said, well, yeah, that would be a first for my channel. Someone in that kind of belief system coming on to talk about how they got their way out of there. So that was an interesting one. But for the most part, it is a deconversion story. And I would say easily 75% or better are ex-Christians of some form, like even JWs or Mormons or whatever.
Gotcha.
I've had some ex-Muslims on. I've had a couple ex-Jews on. Like I'm an ex-Jew myself. So yeah, there's a little bit of story to that one too.
Do you find some of the people that you talk to, like they're not necessarily into paganism, but they've deconverted from, like you said, maybe an Abrahamic religion, but they're more into like a power behind, like almost like a Star Warsy force? I feel like I'm coming up with more people than I'm
Jediism.
Well, like they wouldn't want per se like the actual Jedi stuff. I'm sure there's people that think that's real, but I mean, there's people that think anything's real. But just this general force feeling like, oh, there's God is just love, or God is in us. God is in us. We're God. And I'm surprised at how many people I've come across in deconversion groups and discussion groups and Facebook groups where they've deconverted. But and they've thought through so many issues, like you said, they're just the bullshit is just so obvious. And then they're like, but I really like this power that's behind the universe. It's God. It must be God. I'm like, well, you questioned all that other stuff. Why are you not questioning this? And I'm just curious if you find some of that coming through, or if that's pretty rare for you.
I have not had anyone like that.
Okay.
I've met people, talked to them on Twitter about that. Oh, I'm not religious. I don't belong to a religion, but I still think that there is an all-powerful being of some kind, a prime mover, if you will, which is more of a deistic take. And I have those street epistemology style conversations with them, like, well, what is it that convinced you that this is actually the case, right? Like, did you have some type of experience that convinced you of this? And they usually say yes and give me some little story about it. And I thought about maybe adding that kind of a show, but man, my time schedule is just not flexible enough to add another show to my roster.
Yeah, for sure. I was just curious, you're speaking of changes, I know I saw one of your videos a while ago was about you're working on a studio for, I guess it was somebody else, you're helping build a studio. But is there any technology changes or studio changes you're trying to make? I know I've got a whole wish list of things I'd love to get if I could.
We are slowly but surely working on. We're going to be using 4K cameras,
Nice.
which I've got sitting over there. Actually got a pretty good deal on them.
That's awesome.
They're the hero type, the ones that people clip on type thing. Somebody gave us a TV, like a big 60-inch TV that we're going to use in the background. We're going to have it. We're hoping to get one. I'm still trying to find a decent one, but we want one of those arms that can lower and like this kind of thing where it can come down and then go up. And so we can have some newsy kind of articles going up there or whatever, or bring in a co-host, because once a month, Randolph is the guy I'm doing it with. Randolph Richardson. He's the president of Canadian Atheists, and I'm actually the official community advocate for Canadian Atheists. He'd be a good guy to get on here too, to talk to.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, basically not too much that we don't already have that we can't use. I've got a green screen, so we can use that. We're probably going to have like fake looking trees in the background with little nooks in them where we can stick our drinks and stuff, and people be like, hey, look, they're grabbing drinks out of a tree. so Canadian. What is that, maple syrup? So
Exactly.
Yeah, we'll have some props like that, and it's just going to be like another call-in show, very similar to like the Atheist Experience, except we're not going to limit it to just talking about beliefs and stuff. We might talk about community stuff like that too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I was curious, kind of going into your story. You obviously you talk to a lot of people about their deconversions, and I've seen quite a few of your videos. I love how you do it. I love how you have a lot of fun with it too. It's very entertaining. It's not just telling a story like as if you're reading a book. It's
Right.
a lot of back and forth. But I don't know how many times you get a chance to really dive into your story. I'm sure you've done it some, but I'd love to do it with you here today, just to ask you, and just to start with, what was your background like? I know you. I've heard a little bit about you being adopted, but I'd love to hear it in your words and kind of what your
Sure.
journey was like.
Actually, my story, the first year I was on, when Randolph and I first met up, he's like, "Hey, I should on April 1st, we should do a reversal. I'll interview you about your deconversion story on your channel." And I thought, yeah, that's kind of fun. We'll do that.
Nice.
So that's on there actually.
Okay, I'll look for that one.
Basically, yeah, if I go, I don't remember any of this, of course, but I was conceived by a Christian couple. My birth father was Catholic, and his mom was quite staunch Catholic, which was my grandmother. So, they were fooling around in the back of a 57 Chevy, I've been told, which I thought was pretty cool. So I was conceived in the back of a 57 Chevy Bel Air hardtop 2-door. So that's pretty cool. And the weird thing about it is my dad that I grew up with, my adopted dad, he was saving that exact vehicle for me when I turned of age. Unfortunately, when they moved out of Florida, his mom made him sell it. What do you do? Damn it. Yeah, factory colors too. I would have been like drooling all over that thing. But anyway, so I was conceived by a Christian couple, and they decided, because they weren't married and it would cause way too many problems, they would do, because they didn't want to abort or anything like that, because they don't really do that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So I was put up for adoption, and I was adopted by a Jewish couple, which I always thought, if there's really a God out there, especially the one that's described in the Bible, if Christianity is the right path, why would he do that? Why would he have me born to Christians, the right path, and then brought up by people that don't even believe in Jesus? Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was raised in a Jewish home. All the way through, I was, somewhat of a believer. I could think back to my youth and questioning it constantly. Like, is this shit real? Because I had to go to Hebrew school, so we'd tell the stories of David and Goliath and Samson and Delilah and all these fantastical tales with magic and miracles and yada yada. And to me, it just sounded like all the Greek shit that I've been reading, or Roman mythology, or Norse mythology. It just sounded like all the fantastical stories that they had too. But, I still thought that God was a possibility, and I would talk to him all the time. Yeah, I'm being beat up at school. God, can you do something about that kind of thing? Of course, nothing ever fucking happened. But
so they were, your parents were your adoptive, that's the right word, adoptive parents were fairly practicing. Then they weren't just like going on once a year or something.
I would say when we were growing up, we went to synagogue, on the Fridays, but I was telling you, it was more of just to see what the latest fashions are people are wearing, and for a community and stuff like that. And by the time I had my bar mitzvah, I was already a doubter, but I still thought the possibility was there.
Can I ask you a question? You mentioned bar mitzvah.
Sure.
What name did you use for God back then? Was it, did you call him Yahweh? Did you call him Hashem? Or how do you describe him?
I don't even remember. It wasn't Yahweh. I know that.
I know a lot of the Jewish people I've spoken to recently use the word Hashem, which just means the name. The name,
yeah.
I'm not sure if that's typical or not.
Yeah, it was common. I don't really remember. I didn't really pay a lot of attention. I hated it there. It was so boring, right? In Hebrew school, I always get kicked out because I was always asking questions that they didn't like. So there's no such thing as giants, teacher. What the fuck is this bullshit? So she'd throw me out in the hallway or whatever. The
Nephilim passages.
Yeah, Nephilim passage. Well, just the Goliath story, like a giant. And then one of the questions that I think I asked that really kind of bothered her was about Noah's flood. I said, how could it be possible to put every species of animal onto a boat that size? They'd be dead because of methane. Because I'm growing up as a kid, I was always into chemistry, right? Which is what I do now. I'm actually a chemist for an environmental company called GFL.
That's awesome.
Oh, it's not that big a deal. It's just some. I test waste oil for contaminations like heavy metals and PCBs and stuff. But,
Gotcha.
and I'm in charge of the antifreeze recycling department too. So we recycle waste antifreeze back into new stuff, and then I have to test all the new stuff to make sure it's up to our standards.
Hmm.
It's easy though. A trained monkey could do what I do, really. Where was I? Oh yeah. So basically, I caused a lot of trouble as a kid. and
It's a good question though. The methane thing is a great point. I mean, it's one of many just points to say this doesn't make sense, but what a great
there's no
point.
windows in the thing, right? There's no windows in the thing. I think the one that bothered her the most was I said, well, where did they put the termites? Because it's a wooden boat. What, did God magically put them to sleep for the entire trip?
Have you seen Seth Andrews' one? I'm sure it was a long time ago, but did you see his one ever about Noah's story? He has this whole list of like things that are like, what makes sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I love stuff like that because it's like you really do. It should be obvious. You shouldn't have to ask those stupid questions. Like we should just be able to look at that and say that's clearly mythology. But for some of us, it's like you have to walk through that stuff to get there. Otherwise it's going to seem real to them.
Yep. Yeah. You hear that, Ken? It's not real. One Hovine too. Yeah, guys, come on.
Have you ever spoken to him, by the way?
No, thankfully. No, actually was joking about that with Aaron just recently.
Can I ask you real quick? I didn't mean to get on this, but since you mentioned him, do you find yourself at all hesitant to talk to some people? Not because they're not going to be interesting people or personalities, or that the topics might be very, fun to kind of banter with and even heated. It'd be entertaining, but just in the sense of like, it's just not worth it. You like for me, I remember this concept that Richard Dawkins brought forth, where someone said, why don't you debate Christians more? He said, I wouldn't debate someone on the stork theory of reproduction. Like, that's not how babies are made. I'm not going to debate it. It's just that's a ridiculous venue to go down. And that's just, it kind of feels like that to me. Like, I'd rather talk to people that have escaped, or at least are willing to, if they haven't escaped, they're willing to at least say, let's be honest with what's out there.
Yeah, I've been asked before. I've been asked to debate about a few topics: morality, which seems to be one of their favorite ones. And I'm like, what do you mean debate about morality? All right, people, morals are fluid and they're subjective. They've changed throughout the years, depending on societal norms. And your morals are what you consider to be moral, right? It's like you could say there's objective morality, but that generally is when we have a society that gets together and says, okay, we need to make this objective, this objective, this objective, and this objective. We can all agree. Yeah, we all agree. Okay, we'll call that objectively moral. But they are still subjectively moral, or they're still subjective morals, because they all come from individuals. Just because we get together and call them as a collective objective still doesn't really make them objective.
Yeah.
But so sure. That's what I spew out to them, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, that's no, you have to have God. No, you fucking don't. You don't need a God to be a decent human being.
I always love too how it's like when you like look at what their book says, and I say it like, as if it's me versus them. It's not me versus them. I was in it, so it used to be me. But when you look at the book that I came from, it's like, okay, so you feel like saying, okay, once you read this book of genocide, land theft, slavery, tribalism or racism, whatever you want to call it, genital mutilation, stoning, child brides or worse, and it's like human trafficking, basically. You're like, okay, now that you've got this book with all this crazy stuff in it, you're going to come ask us, where's your morality coming from? Like, do you realize what you're saying? It boggles my mind.
I know, me too. It's like, you read the book you're referring to? Or have you just been read the nice little happy-go-lucky parts out of it, and nobody mentioned the dashing the infants against the rocks in Psalms, right? And like nobody's mentioned that to you.
Yeah, exactly. It's my
I brought that one up, and she said, actually, well, there's a reason for that. And I'm like, there's no good fucking reason to smash infants on the rocks. I don't care. Oh, well, it's revenge for them killing. I don't care, lady. You could be better than those people and not do it.
Yeah.
That would be morally superior, but oh no.
I love Matt Dillahunty's done such a good job of. I've listened to so many. In fact, a lot of his stuff was, I would say, on this particular topic was part of some of the major leaps that I was able to make in my deconversion way back in the day. Gosh, it's almost going on not quite 2 years here, but year and a half at least. But just his point of like I remember at one point he said something like, I'm probably botching the quote, but the idea that like he could take the Bible and just say, don't own people, and he's immediately got better morality than God. Like that's
even
simple.
with one line. Yeah.
One line. Yeah.
That should have been what, like, what the 10 Commandments just bugs the shit out of me. It's like, so the first one is, I'm an egomaniacal piece of shit, and I don't want you to worship anyone else but me. Like, that apparently is a sin. That first one could have been, you know what? Idiot sticks, don't own other human beings as property. Great starter, right? Then you say, you know what? Unless your life is in threat, don't kill people. You know what? If unless you're starving and you need to eat something and there's a piece of bread lying around that you could just reach over, grab, and run away with it, don't steal from people. You know, because there's always reasons why you might break a rule for something. It might be life-threatening or starvation or whatever. So I always say, like, even I might steal a loaf of bread to feed a family, right? Is that a bad thing? Well, sure. The guy that made the bread is out 20 cents or whatever it costs to make a loaf of bread. Back then, I mean. I'm sure it was even less than that at that point. But you know what I mean? Like, there's certain things that you can do that people might go, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Morals are subjective.
Yeah, I know that they wouldn't agree either with evolution. A lot of them wouldn't, but it's like,
where's the other one I got challenged on?
Yeah, but I mean, in the sense of morality, like, where would you stop? Like, so if you're going to question our morality, are we questioning the Neanderthals' morality? Are we questioning the chimpanzees' morality? Like, how far do you go back before you admit that this is getting a little bit crazy? But just a side thought I think about sometimes. What were you going to say about the evolution part of it?
Well, I've been, theists always say, well, you have to prove that evolution is true. I go, no, I don't. First of all, I'm a chemist, so I know a little bit about biochemistry, but no, I don't have to prove anything. It's already proven. Well, not proven, but it's already been demonstrated to be a thing, a fact, right? Evolution through natural selection is a fact. No matter, I don't care what you believe or how much you're going to cry about it. You can't get around that.
Yeah,
right. I could drop a mountain of evidence on you, but not that you would read it, but because they rarely ever do.
Yeah. Or they twist it in some way.
Yeah. And we know, and well, where did all life come from? Well, we're still working on that part. I'm not sure if you know the Wells Urley, is that how it sounds? Urley or experiment way back in the 60s, 50s or something like that?
I don't think I do know.
They had chemicals, and then they put it through, the right conditions with a little bit of electricity, a little bit of radiation, a little bit of water, a little bit of heat, a little bit of this, that, and the other thing. And they were able to form organic molecules out of just chemistry, but nothing that started to become life. But those organic molecules, given enough time, would have started producing self-replicating stuff like nucleic acid, RNA type stuff, right? So they just, they're still working on that. There have been computer simulations that they've done with the same sort of idea. And according to the computer simulations, life did arise. But of course, they're going to deny that as being evidential, right? Because it's a computer simulation.
Exactly.
So,
well, I love that. I don't know anywhere near enough of that as I should. I've been focused more on the origins of Christianity, the origins of Judaism and of the Bible. But if I get through a few more hoops in that arena over the next couple of years, I definitely want to get more educated in evolution. That's such a critical part of our understanding of who we are and where we came from.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, going back to your story, so you grew up in a moderately Jewish home, exposed to the Bible. Were your adoptive parents the kind of people that would have been upset if you had walked away from the faith?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Well, my dad passed away before I even told him that I was a non-believer.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
He had ideas anyway, right? Mom knew, like I told her a long time ago, and she still thinks it's, she's not sure she believes either. So
Interesting.
she says, I've had doubts for a long time. So, yeah.
Hmm.
But she still uses like those common expressions like, oh, God forbid, or, by the grace of God, or whatever, stuff like that, right? But they're just old colloquialisms really to her now. Not so much any actual belief in a deity. Well, I think she's kind of teeters on it.
Yeah.
At times when she needs the comfort, then he's real. And then after that, it's not so much. Like losing, like we lost our dad, and she had a boyfriend for a few years. He passed away. And she's like, how come this keeps happening to me? This God person can't possibly be real. He should. This kind of suffering is just unnecessary.
Yeah.
So, well, if he was real, then yes, it would be. This kind of suffering is just a fact of reality. We all go through it from time to time. But just make the best and keep going.
It's interesting what you just said about going back to it for comfort. I remember someone else talking about a related aspect of this, where like, I forget exactly how they put it, but you're really deconverted when that whole, like that reflex to go back to God, even if it's just like a millisecond, like you almost get, creamed in a car accident, like, almost got really hurt, but everyone's okay now. You're on the side of the road, everything's okay, and like, we're all okay. And like when you're a Christian, you'd be like, of course, thank God, Jesus, thank you for saving us, for protecting us. When you're kind of like halfway out, you're still gonna be like, oh God, thank you, thank you, thank you. But once you're like out, it's just like that just drops. And I kind of feel like I'm proud of myself in a sense, like that stuff just kind of drops, where you don't go back for comfort. You don't have this afterthought of, oh God, oh wait, what am I saying? There's like, you don't have to correct yourself or pull yourself back in. You're just like, it just goes away. I mean, there's still the whole stuff like, this, like you said, colloquially, I might think, oh my God. And it's just like, that's just because the what we're saying. But I mean, it just like the way we would say, oh my goodness, or oh my word, or what in the world, that's just, it's just an expression to say it. But it's like, it's kind of cool when you're like, yeah, this is actually like the tentacles are being, they're dissipating, they're going away. I love thinking about that.
I still use stuff like, oh my Lord, like that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's definitely a colloquialism.
Yeah.
Because clearly I don't believe in that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I was in an accident, as you brought up, and after the accident, I'm like, whew, got lucky on that one. that's not, oh thank God, or whatever. It's, oh yeah, I made it through that one, or another disaster averted, sort of.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't do the whole thank God thing, or I'll say thank goodness. But
I think the one time that I remember, I've tried a lot to remember my actual moment of deconversion. I know people talk about some of their deconversions were very slow, almost to the point where they can't remember when it really happened. They're just like, 5 years ago I was a Christian, 5 years later I wasn't. For me, it was like, I thought about it very, very seriously for about 2 years. And it was like, I wasn't even contemplating the idea of atheism being on the radar. It was like, I was just really confused.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, just like, I mean, the idea of atheism was just like, that's stupid. Of course I'm not going to be an atheist. Like, I wouldn't have even said that much. I would have just not thought about it. And I thought about it, and I researched it, and I studied, and especially the origins. Like, I'm a Bible college grad. I went to school to be a pastor and a missionary. So like, I was in it to win it, and I knew it at all. And I didn't know anything about origins of Christianity. They'd never, decades of preparation. They never said anything about where this stuff came from. And so once I finally found out, there was just one day, literally right at this computer, and just 17 months or so ago, it just came flooding in an hour, and I was done. I was like, and this is where the reason I say this is the expression, oh my God. I could have easily, I don't know if I said it, but I could have easily said to myself, oh my God, this isn't real. Like, that was like the way it felt, like, wow, this isn't real. And I remember just saying to myself, like, several things like, this isn't real, is it? It's like I was talking to myself, this isn't real, is it? And I answered, like, no, it's not. answer yourself, it's not real. And I was like, this has never been real, has it? No, it hasn't ever been real. And it's like you have to self-talk yourself through it. And it's amazing, the journey. But anyway, I want to get back to your story. I can tell my story another time. So what happened next with
Oh, you will. We'll set that up.
Sure. So what happened next with your, when did you take it from I'm not sure if this is real to where you're at today?
Probably well, there's more in there before today.
Yeah, please.
I gave up on the idea of an all-powerful deity type thing probably in my 20s.
Okay.
And then I started dating a girl who was Wiccan.
Mm.
And I kind of got into the whole Wicca thing for a while there. When she's talking about, oh yeah, well, after being with her for a little bit, she's like, oh yeah, sex magic. And so I'm like, pardon? What kind of magic? Oh, sex, raising a cone of power during sexual escapade. Yeah, I'm like, so say that again? What? Raising what? Oh, I'm already raised. That kind of thing. So I dated her for a couple of years and kind of got into the whole Wicca thing and tried a few spells. Because we were kind of hard for cash at one time, and I thought I'd try there's a spell you could do with a porcelain bowl. It has to be an earthen type bowl, so porcelain bowl or whatever. And you put a silver dollar, which I happen to have, inside there, fill it halfway with water, and you take it outside and you catch the full moon on like the image of it over top of the coin, and you chant some bullshit. And apparently it brings you money. Well, I did that, and nothing really happened. However, days before that, I put an ad in the paper to sell a couple of electronic things, like a couple of VCRs, and I ended up with like an extra $100 because I sold the VCRs. And my girlfriend's like, see, it worked. I was like, no, the ad in the paper got me the money, not the fucking spell, right? And she's, oh, come on, you have to believe in that sort of thing. But I'm like, no, I don't. I tried a couple spells, and I call bullshit, right? So.
Did you ever see anything though that did kind of give you that question, like, whoa, what just happened? That was cool. Like, did anything kind of shake you up at all?
I remember her telling me a story about a Ouija board.
Okay.
That kind of, I was like, ooh, that's interesting. She's saying that she did a Ouija board one time, and the spirits were able to tell her exactly what Buddy had for lunch. He's like, well, then ask them what I had for lunch today. She's like, okay, I'll see if I can find out. What did David have for lunch today? And then the little thing keeps going around, the little Ouija board thing going around, and it spells out Big Mac. And I'm like, what? Get out. He goes, and she said, oh yeah. And he goes, what? Really? And he ran to his car, brought a McDonald's bag in, and dumped out a Big Mac container. And for a non-skeptical mind, which I was at the time, or not as skeptical as I am today, that's convincing. Right?
Yeah.
But how do I know that she didn't see the Big Mac container in there before? Because she was out there welcoming them in, right? So how do I know? So
it's interesting. It reminds me of that. Did you ever see that old Oprah clip where Dan Barker it was where he and Annie Laurie Gaylor were on?
I remember them being on there. Yeah.
They weren't married. I think they had never met before, or just met backstage or something. But in one of those old clips, Dan Barker was talking about how he had seen actual healings. Like, so I forget what he said, but the example would be like somebody's in a wheelchair and they can't stand up, and now they can. And it was like, it wasn't like a charlatan. It was like, this looks really real. And it's interesting. I haven't interviewed anybody yet who's had an experience like that where they could say, look, I
have not.
This is unexplainable. But I'd be curious to hear someone. I'd love to hear that kind of story up close and personal. And
yeah,
I've never
cool.
Never even heard it in real life. I had one thing happen. I remember years ago when I was a little kid, I had something happen where I saw somebody.
I've had experiences.
But I like, you have to, do you question yourself a lot? Like when you see that, you're like, did I see that right? Like,
I didn't at the time.
Okay.
But knowing more about neurological science, I understand better now. So now I write it off as just a delusional sort of thing.
Yeah. So when you were with the girlfriend who was Wiccan, were you actually considering it? Were you just like observing her, or were you actually considering that as a potentially the right way to see the world?
I was calling myself Wiccan for quite a few years.
Okay.
Not that I really believed a lot in it. For me, it was just fun. It was trendy. It was fun. It was you're dressing in all black, that kind of thing, right? Although I pretty much dress in black anyways all the time, except not black pants anymore. But here in the summertime, it gets too fucking hot to be wearing all black. But
Johnny Cash, got a good.
Yeah, someone's doing it already.
Just curious, last question on that. Did you have, you mentioned spells, did you ever do a spell and actually think this probably did come true? And like, no, okay.
No, not even close.
How is that? I've said the last question one more. Is that world pretty big of the like Wiccans and witches? I don't honestly know much about it. Is there a lot of people in it, or is it really niche?
I think it was a little bit more popular back in this is the 90s we're talking. So I think there was a big popularity of it back then. I still know quite a few. There's a good chunk of them too. Yeah, there were. Yeah. Well, look at The Craft, right? Yeah. Right. And then you had the one on TV, Charmed and Buffy. Yeah, all that shit. Yeah. Which I used to watch. I used to watch those shows.
It's crazy. I never got into those, but they're interesting. Well, so what was your next phase of religion or faith after the Wiccan phase?
I think after the Wiccan thing, I still clung on to a lot of New Agey kind of stuff. Like, I had crystals, which is because I thought you hear about some technological advancements like using crystals like quartz to store information. And I thought, well, hell, that means that they can hold energy, which isn't true. I mean, they do, but it's energy that's trapped. It's not going anywhere. Right. Just more or less. So, but I used to believe in all that kind of stuff. And eventually, once I started learning and knowing a little bit more, because I actually took some schooling for chemistry and stuff like that, and you understand how the elements work and how chemicals work and how chemical energies work, and it's nonsensical. So eventually I just found my way out of that, and probably not until probably my late 30s, maybe even early 40s, is when I finally came out and said, listen, I haven't really believed in a deity for like a long time. I was tampering with certain things, but no, I'm an atheist. All that shit I was into before, all the religious stuff I did even before that, it's bunk, it's bullshit. It can't possibly be real. like the thought of an afterlife. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Sean Carroll, but he wrote a little piece. He's a astrophysicist or cosmologist, that kind of guy. He wrote a little piece about afterlife, where he says it's not possible because it breaks the laws of physics, the laws of everyday physics that we do know. We know pretty much everything about everyday physics. There's lots of physics we don't quite know yet, but we are working on it. But the stuff that we are certain about, with a high amount of certainty, an afterlife could not be possible. Just cannot be possible, not according to those laws of physics. Like people say, well, if your consciousness carries on past death, where is it? Right? What is it? Is it a form of energy? Because if it's a form of energy, then we'd be able to measure it. What's storing it? What's holding it together? Like ghosts and stuff. Like what's keeping that energy together? Yeah, energy doesn't do that. It doesn't take form, like unless it's ball lightning. But it doesn't. What you think of as a specter or a ghost would dissipate and just become literally just part of the universe again. But there's no consciousness involved there. A consciousness, as far as we know, requires a mind, because that's where it comes from. So it would have to be contained in something. Maybe, who knows how computer technology will advance? Maybe we'll be able to upload our consciousness at some point. I think that's, at least for now, and probably for the foreseeable future, I think that's quite unlikely, but they have made some inroads in that type of technology. So they can see into your brain now. They can see your dream imagery. They can see all kinds of neat things. So who knows where it'll take us?
On that note, did you ever see the show Caprica?
I
The
yeah, like a
Battlestar
while back.
Galactica offshoot,
Yeah.
where they had that. It's like instead of going to the internet like we do, you actually go into it it's it's if you would go into a chat room, but instead of going with text, you're going like through virtual reality.
Yeah.
And so, but to get into it, it has to kind of create this avatar of you so that you look like a real person in this make-believe world that you look like you're actually entering. And so the avatar is like a limited amount of information. Of course, it's just a shell, but in the show they do that where they actually take it to the next level where they actually download all of your information so that even if you got killed, your avatar could still stay on life and it would kind of be you. And that's how they kind of do their whole robots, that the identity gets re-input into a robot. So now the robot is now basically got the consciousness and memories of the person that was downloaded. So it's fascinating to think about. I don't know if that'll
but that's still something that could contain your consciousness, though, right? But once you die, where does it go? I like it. There's an analogy that I'm quite fond of, and you probably have heard Matt or others say this. What happens to the flame when you blow out a candle? Doesn't go anywhere. Energy doesn't die, it just changes form, right? Now people like to use that one, but they're not using it correctly. When you blow out the flame, that smoke you see that fizzles away, that's what happened to the flame. It changed form into smoke and is now dissipating.
Yeah.
So yeah. Now for your neurological electronical impulses or whatever the hell they call them, they stop firing, and once brain death occurs, then cell death completes, and that's it. You become, if you do change form of energy, if you're like most people, you get buried, then you now become the food and the food for the fauna and flora that you fed off of in your lifetime. So they are now using you as energy. So that's where your energy goes.
The circle of life.
That's right.
Just you mentioned the afterlife. When you realized that, did that shake you up at all? Like anyone that you had known had already passed? Did it shake you up to think, I thought I might see them again, and now I don't think I'm going to? Like, did that affect you at all, or were you okay with it right away?
I think the initial thought of that, because I used to think that it was possible. I used to try to communicate with dead people. I wanted to be a ghost hunter. Actually, that's something that Aaron and I had in common. We were laughing about that, actually. I was all set up. I got a camera. We're going to go. There's the most haunted places in BC, which is where I live, and we're going to go check it out and get EVPs and all kinds of stuff. But was I disappointed when I figured out that it wasn't possible? I think the initial shock made me kind of go, oh, because now you're kind of, well, so this is it then. And initially that's kind of like, oh, well, fuck, like, damn it. So, but once you get past that initial little shock, well, for me anyways, it was like, actually, it's not a big deal. Now I realize that this is my one chance at doing something while I'm here, because I'm lucky to be here on multiple levels, because I could have been aborted for one. And, just that specific sperm made its way and created me in a womb somewhere, or ultimately became me. So I got that shot at life and to experience this amazing cosmos and planet that we live on. So I'm going to do, once I realize that, I'm like, now I'm going to do my best to leave some form of a legacy behind, because that is really how you live on.
Yeah.
You live on by the stories that people will tell of you, by the stuff that you've done for your community, for society. There's lots of names that we will never forget, like Newton. I don't think I'll ever be that level, but I want to leave behind these stories where people go, oh yeah, I remember that Neil guy. He started that blood driver group that brought in lots of blood donations every year. That was pretty cool. Or he was the guy that used to help people through tough times when they're deconversions, or listen to their stories, stuff like that. So that's the kind of thing that people will continue to talk about, and that's how you continue living, is through stories, right? So,
leaving the planet better than we found it.
Yeah, and that's what I aim to do.
I was just curious. I've asked this question before of other people, and I've been surprised at some of the answers. But if you, knowing that we know this is just theoretical and it's just make believe, but if you could live forever, would you want to?
No.
Gotcha.
No, hell no. I mean, I know it's literally something like an 8 with an uncountable number of zeros after it, but the universe will end in a heat death at some point, and I really don't want to be around. When the last black hole, which is the black hole that swallowed all the other black holes, blows up, I don't want to be around for that. Screw that.
I hear you.
Now, if we could extend our life, I'm not sure if you ever saw that special with Adam Savage from Mythbusters, but the world's oldest man, where they were able to develop technologies like organ replacement type stuff that you could do on a 3D printer. Oh, my kidney's toast. Let's put a new one in. And they also found a genetic code to slow aging process down, so you would still age, but it would take like 10 times longer. And he was the world's first, according to the show, he was the world's first 1,000-year-old man. So he had all his great grandkids with him while he was celebrating his 1,000th birthday. So I think if we ever hit a stage where we could extend our life to that kind of thing, I'd be down to that. I could stick around for 1,000 years and see how the shit shapes up. I'm totally down to see what the future's got in store for us. I mean, let's face it, some of our future stuff doesn't look so good if we don't stop treating the planet the way we are. There ain't going to be another 1,000 years on here.
Yeah, good point. I was going to say, too, if we all live to be 1,000, we're going to have to make some changes to Social Security or something.
Yeah. It'll probably disappear.
Whatever they call it in Canada.
And when do you retire?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'd be seeing 800-year-old men greeting people at Walmart.
Yeah. Are you Noah?
By the way, I would, to that question, I would want to live forever. I still struggle with that a lot.
Really? Yeah.
I think just the idea, not just of living forever, although that in and of itself would be a plus. I think I feel like there's so much that I want to learn. I'm the kind of person that could literally, if you said to me, I'm really sorry, but you're going to spend the rest of your life by yourself in a library, a really big one with a lot of books, but that's all you get to do for the rest of your life, I would say, okay, cool, let's do it. If someone said all you can do is just read, watch YouTube videos and just learn stuff, someone said you have to go, travel to every country of the world, if you had to learn every craft, I know a few crafts. I used to be a custom cabinet maker, but if someone said you have to learn everything, you have to learn pottery, metallurgy, all this, I would be like, okay. And I would feel, I'm not the kind of person who just wants to be like, I want to do it all. And I want to do it all really well, not just be like, I took a weekend class, like I want to master this and master that.
Sure.
And I feel like there's not enough time to do any of that with even 1,000 years. It'd be hard to do it all. But I feel like I think the picture that Christianity, and I know we're going to get into some of this in a minute, but the picture that Christianity gives you is not just that you're going to live forever, but it's this sense of you aren't really even starting your real life yet. Like you're just a shell of who you're going to be.
Yep.
And when you get to that point, you're going to look back at yourself and you're going to recognize, yeah, that was me back on earth in this life. But that was just like this shadow.
By the way,
yeah,
that's part of the problem. That type of thought.
It is. But I think when you get sucked into it for decades like I did, and then you're like, oh wait, that's not real. There is that, maybe that's the tentacles I'm thinking about. Maybe they're not all gone, but just the tentacles staying there for a while of like, that hurts.
One day it's going to be over. Yeah.
Like I thought I was going to get something like much, much better than this. I don't just mean like a big mansion of glory and gold and stuff. I mean like just, I was going to be glorious as a person. I was going to be like an angel. I was going to be, not all knowing like God, but I was going to know so much. And I think just the picture is painted so beautifully in some senses. I mean, it's not beautiful for the people that are burning in hell forever, but it's painted so beautifully for the people on the good side that it's kind of hard to just step back and say, I guess I don't get any of that, Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, sure. That's probably a big struggling point for a lot of people when they find their way out. And I've spoken to a couple that was an issue. But I keep reassuring them and said, hey, listen, if it turns out that all that stuff, even though I have actually spoken to a priest, this is many years ago, and he basically came out and said, oh yeah, no, hell's an invention. It's a tool. It's an invention by the church as a tool for control.
Yeah.
Control people through fear, and they will definitely listen to you. Now, you also have to give them the possibility of a reward if you behave. So the whole heaven hell thing, because there really isn't a mention of any of that in the original Old Testament.
Yeah.
They talk about a kingdom with God on earth, not so much in heaven.
Right.
But they don't. But there's no mention of a hell. The way, I guess, a version of hell in the Old Testament would just being without God, being just non-existent and not with God. That would be like a version of it.
Right.
But this hell now that they've got, that they come up with the lake of fire and stuff, I always joke with people. I'm like, well, come on, man. Most of the scientists are non-believers. Most of them. You think by now, lots of them that are dead and have gone down there, they've probably set up air conditioning. They've got all kinds of stuff down there. They're scientists, man.
Exactly. So, can I ask you? You mentioned obviously your natural parents were Christians, but your time in your childhood home was Jewish. Did you ever get kind of invited or pulled into Christian circles at all, where people did try to?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
What was that?
Okay. In my neighborhood, there were lots. I think we were one of 4 Jewish families in the neighborhood. But my best friend growing up was Christian, so I used to go and he'd come over to my place and sleep over on Hanukkah, and he'd get a little Hanukkah gift, and then I'd go over to his place on Christmas and sleep over there, and I'd get something from Santa. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, just exchanging our traditions and having fun with it, right? Because when you're a kid, who gives a shit about the religious stuff? We just want the presents.
That's right.
And all the food, man. It was all about the food. So, I was influenced, of course, by multiple religions. We had an Indian family, like East Indian family, that lived in our neighborhood as well. So we got to learn about Holi and other what was it, Ramadan and stuff like that, right? And which was really neat stuff. And growing up with my sister was really good friends with the little East Indian girl that lived around the street. So she'd bring over like curry and stuff like that. And that's when I fell in love with it.
Nice.
Oh man, this is so good. It's so, I was influenced by lots of other cultures growing up. I mean, we had a fairly multicultural type neighborhood.
Do you remember any of them the Christians especially proselytizing, trying to get you to think about the cross and Christ?
We had, and I said, sure, I'll go check it out. Some Jehovah's Witnesses, they do the door-to-door thing. And, I sat talking, I was a kid though. It was like 12 or 13 or something. I was chatting with them and they're like, oh, you should come, you should check it out. And I said, yeah, sure. So I went and I checked it out and it was boring as fuck. And they said, well, you guys got to go down now and check out the Sunday school. So I'm down there and there's all these little Christian kids around, or little Jehovah's Witness kids around, and the teacher's asking all these questions, and I'm got my arm up because I know the answers. We were taught this shit years ago at Hebrew school. And she's like, could you possibly maybe let some of the other kids try to answer? I'm like, hey, well, my fault I know the answers to these and they don't. So I got kicked out. And they didn't ask me to come back again, and they stopped coming around our house. That was a little bit of a shithead back then. But
did you see a difference between Jehovah's Witnesses and I guess what you call Protestant evangelical Christians?
Yeah, sure. I never understood that. You don't celebrate your birthday? What? That was such a foreign concept to me. You don't do Christmas? What? And I doubt this is the reason, but my friend Mark, who was Jehovah's Witness, said, oh yeah, well, the reason is when you're born, you haven't accomplished anything yet. So what's there to celebrate? I'm like, well, okay, I get it. That's dumb. It's like it's a celebration of your life starting is what it is, or what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Who doesn't want some cake and frosting?
Right. And presents, man. Presents.
So did you ever get the how should I put it? The official gospel presentation given to you?
Yeah. I still have, I think, 3 Bibles that have been given to me.
Gotcha. I mean, did they ever go through the whole step-by-step of?
Oh yeah.
Did you ever get tempted to believe? Like, did they ever sound convincing at all to you?
No. I remember the years ago, my 30s, when I was living with a couple of friends of mine. We rented out a house, and I think these guys were Mormon, and they would come by, and one time I'm then, you know what? I just made some coffee. Come on in, guys. Or of course they didn't have any coffee; they had water because they don't drink coffee. So, and they were talking about it, and I'm like, yeah, I was raised Jewish. I'm very familiar with the Old Testament, and actually quite familiar with the New Testament because of a friend of mine. So I actually have a couple of copies of this thing that other people like you guys have tried to give me. And they gave me a Book of Mormon. I said, oh, cool. I don't have this one yet. It's like, hey, I've got the trilogy now.
Yeah, there's more.
So, yeah. And I told them that I'd read it, and I did. And it's crazy. What can I tell you? I mean, a lot of it is quite in line, or pretty much the New Testament, but with some other shit in there.
Yeah.
But we talk about it, and I told him, guys, I haven't been convinced that even a deity of any form exists for quite some time. Well, I was into paganism, and I hardly believed in the green man, for fuck's sakes, right? Like, it's like, you know, you're going to have to do a lot better than giving me stories or telling me that it has to be true because the book says so, because that in and of itself is just a circular argument. So you're going to have to do a lot better than that. And they kept coming back, and I'm like, guys, I don't think this is going to work anymore. Take me off your list. There's other folks in the neighborhood you can go and maybe convince them, but I'm just thoroughly unconvinced. And they, you know what? They respected that. So
you really put up your skeptical, radar, or whatever you want to call it. You put your skeptical senses up pretty early in life, which is really cool. I think those of us
it was doubts. I don't know if it was skepticism. It's just like, I guess it is a form of skepticism, obviously, but I just was doubting a lot of stuff, like it, because to me it sounded like mythology, and it really always did.
I've got to say,
like stories.
I'm kind of jealous. I mean, once you escape, which is, I mean, I know, when you're in it, it's just the idea of escaping is like, escape what? Like, why would you escape the love of God? Like, I got hurt so much by knowing God loves me. What would I escape from? Duh. But once you're out, you're like, wow.
Then you see it.
You see it, and you can't unsee it, which is really, if you've done it the right way. I've heard of people that did it just because the spouse became a Christian, so they became a Christian, or some emotional reason. But if you actually understand, and what I mean by that is, like, for me, it was truly understanding where this came from. I don't think a lot of philosophical arguments would have done it for me. I've seen other people where that was their path, where it was like, I went through the Kalam cosmological argument, and I tore this apart and that apart, or the suffering of the universe. For me, that was never an issue. I'm not saying it shouldn't have been, but it was like, well, look, if God is king, he can do what he wants. And if he wants to use, genocide for his glory, if he wants to burn people in hell for his glory, he's the king. You can't question him. So the philosophical stuff didn't actually help me.
Differ.
Yeah, I beg to differ now, for sure. But I mean, like, what got me out, for me personally, what I needed to understand was, where did this actually come from? And I don't know if you've ever seen it. Do you know a guy named Bill Zurcher?
I've heard the name. I'm not familiar with it, though.
He did. I'm interviewing him in a couple of weeks, so I'll try to send you the video once we do it. But he did a video based on a book he wrote called "Seeing Through Christianity," and it was one of the first times that I'd ever had my eyes open. He was honestly one of the major reasons I deconverted. I love the man. I'm so glad I get to talk to him in a week or two. But he basically started with, like, the very beginning. It's like, let's talk about, where did Yahweh come from? And once you realize, like, oh, shoot, that's not what I was told. And then you find out how, like you said, like, it changes in the Old Testament, where there wasn't a hell, and there wasn't a clearly defined heaven.
There were more than one God, too.
Yeah, more than one God. Yahweh had a wife named Asherah.
Yep.
And it's like, once you get, and then you find out what Zoroastrianism did to the whole thing, and you're like,
yep.
oh shoot, they didn't tell me that in Bible college. And then you get into the Jesus stories and you're like, oh shoot. And it's honestly just, it's ballooned exponentially since then. But
Well, the
it was
Jesus story is basically rip-offs of multiple stories that are almost identical from the local traditions around the Middle Eastern area.
Yeah, exactly. Very much so. And the other thing that I'm coming to study a lot more, and I'm just curious, I won't sidetrack us too much here with this question, but I've been studying two big things now. I was going to say one, but it's become two. But the first one is astrotheology, and the idea that these are star stories. And then the second thing is the whole idea that these potentially are, like I think this is all mythology, right?
Mhm.
But the idea that some of these characters that we're looking at, such as the Jesus character, John the Baptist character, they may actually be based on real historical people, but rewritten in
Over and
code,
over, yeah.
over and over, but in code, because the people
Code.
that were writing them, like the Essenes with the Dead Sea Scrolls, they couldn't
Mm,
tell people like who was who. They couldn't use the word Romans. They have to make up a word for the Romans.
right.
They couldn't talk about Paul. They'd just have to call him, maybe if it's correct, the liar. So you didn't use people's names. You didn't use people's identities. You rewrote the stories in a way that anyone who was in the inside circle knew, but the outsiders would be like, I'm not quite sure what you're trying to tell me. But it was like, it seems more evident that some of this stuff might be actually based on history in some level. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying I'm guessing. I'm learning a lot quickly about the Essenes and what they did, how they wrote their books. But that maybe some of this stuff is just, it's based on so many other things. And it's like we have completely misunderstood the whole thing, not just in the sense of its mythology, but just we have completely, like, we've twisted it from our vantage point, not you and me, but just history. We've twisted it several different times to the point where to unravel it, you can't just like pull one level off and say, oh, it's astrotheology, it's a star story. Well, it might be, but there's more to it. Well, it might be this, it's a rewrite of Zoroastrianism. Well, it might be, but there's even more. And it's like peeling an onion. They're like, there's all these layers, and they're
Mhm.
not just like layers. It's like it's fibers woven together, and it's
Mhm.
really fascinating. It's an interesting thing to study in that sense, and it's kind of
It
cool
is.
to deconvert and think this is bullshit, and then go back and think, well, I still want to figure out what happened. But it's like, I don't know.
You got
Does that make
you got to
sense?
remember, it does, and you got to remember though, before we had the written word, everything was an oral story.
Mm,
So we don't know how many times that story had been changed from telling to telling.
yep.
You're also, like you said, that it could be some historical. Very well, it could be, but was it the people that the Judeo-Christian, or I hate that word, but the Abrahamic belief systems, they have altered those stories for their own usage, and they may have been actually focused on somebody completely else from another area that
Yeah.
the stories were told, and they said, that's really interesting, we could use that. I mean, it's just like, if you think about it, like when we get Christmas, right, which is basically a collection of multiple pagan traditions that were rewrapped all nice with a pretty bow for Christians to have as their story.
Yeah.
Same with Easter. I mean, these are traditions, and it's funny because the Christmas and Easter both fall around the
Solstice.
the solstices and stuff like that, right? Which
Yeah.
were traditionally the pagans observed solstices as changing of the season celebrations.
Yeah. It's
Right?
funny. People tend to be like, I've seen Christians respond to it as if it's like we're trying to act like Dan Brown and the Da Vinci Code. It's like, no, we're not making up fiction here, but there is some of this stuff is
Vinci
real.
Code.
Like the solstices really did have a
Yeah,
major part of so many
of
religions.
course they did.
And then to be like, Jesus is dead for 3 days before he rises again.
Yeah,
I like,
no,
that's
not possible.
exactly what happens at the solstice.
Yeah, but you can't be dead for 3 days and come back to life. It's like I was saying earlier. Once cell death occurs, there's no coming back.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that sense, it's got to be mythology, no matter what else it might have been based on.
Or he rose spiritually.
Yeah.
Which version of it do you want to go down, right?
Did you find yourself ever compelled to study the origins of I guess, more Judaism, anything else, or were you just so skeptical so early that it kind of was like you'll learn, but it's not really gonna make a big deal either way?
My sister, in her last couple of years of high school, did a study on world religions.
Hmm.
So I basically was interested as well, and everything she wrote up about, I would read and check it out. I became sort of like her editor before she handed in her paper. And so I learned a lot just by her, because she'd go to a Unitarian church, or she'd go to a Sikh temple, or she'd go to a Buddhist temple, and she'd check it out, all the thing, and she'd learn and talk to the leaders there, whether it be an imam or a rabbi or a priest or a Buddhist monk or whatever. And she'd get all this information. And that kind of started me down the road to looking into it myself. And I've got a bunch of books actually in the other room. It's weird because usually everything's within reach when I do these things, right? I always have stuff in reach. I don't know if you notice that on my shows. But, yeah. And people kind of make fun of that. So I've got, and I did a lot of reading and investigating different religions, where they formed, how they, and there are an awful lot of similarities to a lot of them, especially, well, not so much like with the Abrahamic stuff has borrowed a lot from its immediate area. But you get the Persian Asian religions that kind of borrowed from each other as well. Like if you look at Hinduism, which I think is currently the oldest still practiced belief system, religion-wise, look at the amount of gods there are there. Yet nowadays they say, well, those are all just different manifestations of Brahma, right? Like they're the creator god, Brahma, right? So they're trying to make it like almost monotheistic now. But that's kind of hard to do when they literally have hundreds of thousands of gods in their belief system, right? So it's you're telling me that Brahma is also Hanuman the monkey god? What? But I guess the way they explained it is there's a little bit of him in each of the representations of the other gods or whatever.
Yeah, I confess my ignorance of some of the religions, like some of the details. I know, broad pictures, but I don't know some of the details that I need to get educated on. Did your sisters study help her? Like, is she still a believer, or?
Yes, she is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It actually, her doing the study, as she puts it, it confirmed my belief in Judaism.
Really?
She was also adopted and also born to Christians. So, yeah.
So her studying the origins led her to dive deeper into Christianity as the real worldview.
Yeah. Yeah. She married a fellow who is like, I call him the part-time rabbi, because he can fill in for when they're not there. And we, I go and I still do the traditional stuff, the Hanukkah, the Passover, even Sukkot, which is the harvest festival. I still partake and hang out with the kids, like my nieces and nephews and stuff like that. But, I poke a lot of fun and I get looks, especially for Passover. I'm like, you guys do know that none of this actually happened, right? I'm whispering that, and my sister's giving me this look like, just shut up and eat your matzo ball soup. So, yeah. So
I love matzo ball soup, by the way.
Oh, it's so good, man. So good. My Aunt Marlene, who is actually her mother's recipe, my grandma Anita. I've been to many, many houses and had different. Hers was always my favorite. My grandma Anita's was always my favorite. And now the recipe is lost. Yeah. I know, but there's a deli that has a version that's pretty close to hers, and not only that, but their matzo balls are the size of baseballs.
Nice.
They're huge. They're big, or I mean softballs. They're monsters. You get one massive one in a container, right, with the soup. And I think that's probably the closest I'm going to get to my grandma's old matzo ball soup recipe. But at least I can get it year round. I don't have to wait till Passover.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember being really sick, and my folks brought me a couple of containers of that. I'm like, just hand feed me, like spoon feed me, people. I can't move.
With your sister going back to Christianity, or I'm sorry, to Judaism, that's correct. Did you ever get a chance to kind of dive into that? Is she open to like an epistemology kind of conversation, or is that kind of a closed door?
I'm not even going to try with her. I mean, I'm sure eventually I'll sit down and do something like that with her, but right now she's definitely expressing that she doesn't have an interest to do that.
Gotcha.
You're trying to turn my kids into atheists? I'm like, I'm going to tell you right now, they're probably going to end up that way. It seems to be the trend. So,
well, I think there's some pretty high percentage. I forget what it is. I should have this memorized by now. I've probably heard it enough times, but Pine Creek was just mentioning it the other day. But like, there's some pretty high percentage of, like, if you have, 10 Catholics, that I think it's like 5 or 6 of them are going to deconvert before their life's over. And
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing. I mean, I feel like too, just, not that I want to take advantage of a really bad situation, but like a lot of people I think are reconsidering evangelical Christianity because of their support for Donald Trump. And it's like,
Yes.
if you're, if it is what it is, and I'm, again, not trying to take advantage of a bad situation, but people are in fact questioning and saying, why is it that the church en masse is saying we're going to follow this wonderful man who's actually a monster? It's like, that's pretty horrible, and people are saying, yeah, maybe we need to rethink this.
There's a reason why they're doing that. He basically, with them as a support group, I think that's what shoot him in for the win. So, and they realize that if they have him on their side and now he's the president, we can start to work on making America a little bit more theocratic.
Yeah.
Right. So we got this guy in there who's on our side. Maybe we can start teaching. Well, see, they don't call it creationism anymore. Now they call it, what are they calling it now?
Intelligent design.
That's intelligent design, to make it sound more intelligent. Yeah. No, it doesn't work, people. So, now they can be, they can start to get their little shoehorns in there into the government and stuff, and they always say, oh, well, we were formed as a Christian nation. No, you weren't. You were formed as a secular nation intentionally. They were getting away from the bloody Church of England to get over here and start their own shit. I mean, that's why they said, hey, listen, if you believe, you got the right to believe here. You can believe whatever you fucking want here. And you have the right to not believe too. So that's the whole freedom of religion thing. But somewhere along the way, these nut bars decided that that wasn't the case.
Just out of curiosity, does most of Canada kind of think of him as a bad guy, or are they split like America, where there's a whole bunch of people that say, "Oh no, he's doing God's work. God bless him."
Yeah. Most of the people I know think he's a shithead, but I have met. We have our conservative belts as well, and most of those people. If they lived in the USA, they'd probably be conservative Republicans, and they'd probably be somewhat evangelical. We've got quite a few here that actually do. I've seen, for when he was running in the States back in the day, I seen a bumper sticker that said Trump for Prime Minister, which I thought was too funny. So yeah, we do have our share, but I don't think we have quite the numbers. Well, our population is a lot smaller than you guys. I mean, everyone in Canada is pretty much the population of California. So,
it's kind of cool to think about how much nature that leaves, like just wide open nature in Canada.
That's why we have fresh water here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I wanted to kind of, I always hate to think about the negative sides of an interview, but I wanted to ask about some sadder subjects and just kind of ask you your perspectives on them. Two of them, basically. Number one, I'm sure as you interview some people, you see some people they're just happy. I'm glad I escaped. Life's good now.
Yeah,
I got over the guilt, the false guilt, the false shame, the ridiculous, hamster wheel of trying to please this God that's not there. I'm just glad I'm in reality. But there's also some people that probably are going through hard stuff, where they lose relationships or loved ones, or they just, things just aren't the same anymore, or even people cut them off. Shunning happens. It's real, even not just in Amish communities, but in everyone else's life. Effective shunning. What kind of, do you see anything like that happening in some of your stories? And are there any patterns you've seen of how people, what people receive from the outside, from the Christian world, and how atheists tend to best deal with that toxicity?
Well, as for dealing with it, I think that's a really personal thing on how you would want to deal with something like that. I've talked to quite a few folks that have been disowned by their family. I've talked to one of my friends, Nacho Witness. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
I know the name, but I've not spoken to him
yet. He is not an out atheist. Like, he's an atheist, but he's not an out atheist, because if he did tell his family, they would definitely, and he's not ready to be on his own, they would definitely kick his ass out, because they are Jehovah's Witnesses, right? Look at Owen, telltale atheist, or I know quite a few that, and especially when you get into the more hardcore subgroups of Christianity, like Mormonism or Jehovah's Witness, that's the biggest thing, is the whole shunning, and some people are like, whatever, and then there's some people that I could tell, like when I talk to them, that there's tears welling, like, and they just don't understand how somebody could choose something that can't even be proven over their own family.
Yeah.
And to me, that's kind of heartbreaking. And I've had, that's, I think the worst thing about it is when you're people that you love and have claimed to love you just kick you to the curb that easily because you don't share that one belief with them anymore.
Yeah.
That's pretty shallow to me. That's one of the things I hate about religion.
Yeah. I think that's what crosses my mind a lot too when I think about it, is how much it divides, both on the planetary scale, obviously we all know that very well, but just in the individual scale, I mean, it literally, it's if you're in it, you feel real happy because you're like, oh, we're all a big Christian family, and
tribalism.
Very tribalistic. And I mean, I can remember distinctly thinking, I mean, I've thought about this many times, distinctly thinking at our families, like extended families gatherings, where we would all of us, I mean, like 100% of us, cousins, aunts, uncles, everybody would bow their heads and fold their hands and pray to Jesus, everybody. And as far as I knew, it was real, and everybody was saying, we pledge our allegiance, to Jesus, as a not just as little individual families, but as a family, a big family. We are Jesus's people. And I remember thinking, I wonder what would happen if just one person said no. Like, how would that work? Like, what would that be like? And like I had one cousin that ended up marrying a Buddhist girl, and I don't know. I've never spoken with her about it. I probably should, but I doubt she was that comfortable with hearing Jesus prayers every single time we got together as a family. And it's amazing when you think about it. It's like, if you're in it, you feel fine, but once you step back, you're like, oh wait, this isn't actually very healthy. Like, there's no room for dissent.
Right. Well, if it helps at all, most of the Buddhists that I've met, I actually work with one, don't, to them it's whatever. If you're in there and you're doing your prayers, great. At least you got something like that.
Yeah.
Right. So it doesn't really, at least the ones that I've met personally, I can't say this for every Buddhist, of course. It doesn't really bother them too much.
Yeah.
For them, they just sit there with you and they'll meditate or something. So, you do your thing, I'm going to do mine.
Yeah, exactly. Have you seen anybody that actually has said, like, they're basically being effectively shunned? Like, they're just, no one's going to talk to them anymore?
Oh yeah. I've spoken to quite a few people that have issues like that. Of course, they do have friends and some family that still talks to them. But like, again, it's usually the more cultish branches of religion that shun people to that extreme. And I've talked to quite a handful of them where they're going with that, and they're still dealing with it to some degree. I mean, of course, if you're shunned by your actual parents, you're dealing with that now for the rest of your life.
Yeah. I know,
but I've also heard a couple of instances where the moms have reached out a little bit to try and see, how are you doing these days? But it was 3 years later, right?
Yeah.
And they don't want to get caught, because if they get caught communicating, then they get excommunicated. So it's horrifying to me.
I've had it a little bit. I haven't been like shunned in an Amish sense, but you can tell, like, people that would communicate more, they just don't communicate anymore. I'm sure if I asked them, hey, can I give you a call, they'd say, oh yeah, sure, what's up? But there's not like any effort anymore. And I have had it honestly directly, unfortunately, with my own mom. My dad passed about 2 years ago, but my mom, yeah, well, she, I was kind of, honestly, it was kind of good. My dad was kind of, he had some medical issues that were kind of basically putting him in a shell of a person. So it was kind of like, it was time. He wasn't really himself for a while. So it was probably for the best that he had passed. But but my mom is fine. You know, she's healthy, and we used to be really close, and just this past month, and I'd asked her a couple times over the last year and a half, you know, hey, can I talk to you, you know, a little bit about religion? And the answer was no, literally no, I'm not talking about it. But something came up, and I said,
You think that's fear? Do you think that's fear based, that they don't want to talk about it?
I've wondered. I've wondered if it's intimidation, like, because
most
atheists know more about the Bible than Christians do by that point, from my experience. So it's like, what are you going to tell me? You know, what are you possibly to tell me to invite me to the gospel when I know it's mythology? But anyway, what happened recently this past month, which surprised me, my mom said that she wants to die. And not in a suicidal sense, just she wishes she were dead because she's got an atheist son. Effectively, the idea.
Whoa, really? She told that to you?
Yeah, and it's. I think I'm reading between the lines here, but I think it's the idea of, like, I have brought a child into this world, and I've got one responsibility: to get that child in a right relationship with the Creator, and get that child to heaven, have peace with the Creator. If I've failed in that one thing, and that child is basically about to burn in hell, then what else, what possibly greater failure can I have? And so she feels like an absolute failure because she has, you know, it's like, number one, it's not her choice, it was my choice, but I get where she's coming from. I'm not like oblivious, I know what she's saying.
Oh, I know you get where it's coming from, but dude, that's another thing about it that really is aggravating, or it's angering.
Yeah.
That it could lead people to think that way.
Yeah. And it's like, it's so, especially when it's so obvious. It's like, if this was, like, if the Bible had been written in a way where it was like coherent, and they'd address the issues of slavery, and like they'd set up front, don't own people, you know, and don't stone people, and don't mutilate genitals of the little boys. Like, if it had been a good book, it'd be a lot harder to escape. But it's like they kind of made it obvious this is a really bad book. If you take it literally, it's like it's kind of obvious why you'd escape. And even just the silly stuff like the sun stood still and talking snakes, like, this is pretty obvious. And yet to think of something that's that obvious and that stupid, that's going to make you, as a, you know, as a family member, as a mother, whatever, to divide from your own children, divide from your, you know, siblings. It just, it's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking.
There's no other way to put it, really.
Yeah.
It's devastating. It's emotionally devastating.
Yeah. And it's so unnecessary. It's like, let's, you know, it's time for this. It's time for this, in my opinion, it's time for this religious stuff to die out. I know it's not going to happen in my lifetime, but it's time for it to end.
It'll never happen. I think as a species, I can't remember what it was I was watching, but they're saying we're like genetically encoded to have, I mean, from our evolutionary standpoint, we have these type of ways of thinking that are just coded into us. You know, if you go think back to our Neolithic times and early humans and other hominids, you know, they had these belief systems. There's evidence of ritualistic burials and all kinds of things with different species. And I think it's just ingrained in us. And it's a hard one. Evolution it'll take a while before that comes out of us, I think.
Do you think?
But I think over the years it will happen over time.
Do you think space travel will have any impact? I wonder if we advance to a point where, say, you know, we're seeing people go to the moon every other week. Do you think that'll?
Or are we going to send missionaries to Mars? You know, like it's not going to happen. Probably. Like in South Park where they found the Marklar guys. But yeah, I don't know. I think what might have a big impact, and I believe that this will happen ultimately, that we will contact some other civilization. How it'll go, who knows? I don't think it'll be in my lifetime, but it could be in my nephew's lifetime.
Yeah,
because our technology is exponentially getting better and better and better and better. I mean, we can now see planets that we couldn't see before. Even with the Kepler, now we got this new one that's up there or going up there, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head.
James Webb.
Yeah, the Webb, right? And it's now we're the next one that's going up is going to be able to take chemical composition shots of these worlds, and it'll tell you what kind of atmosphere they have, whether there's plant life, and once that shit starts coming back and we realize that there's other life out there, and guess what, kids, plant life counts, then that might start the wheels rolling of a new mindset.
Yeah.
Right. Because let's think about it. One of the things I think that it's really hard for them to explain away is, what's the point of a little insignificant world in a below average galaxy, in an average looking solar system, in a below average size galaxy, in this seemingly not too busy section of the universe that is huge? Like, how can we're not even anywhere near the center of this thing. So how is it we're the main attraction created by some deity?
Yeah.
That just does not compute. So, and I think there's got to be other civilizations out there. I mean, it's just too big. And now that we come to the realization that life can happen in extreme situations, extreme places, the likelihood, like they say in Jurassic Park, when life gets a chance, or it happens, right? Like if life will find a way.
Yeah.
And that's evident here. And, there's now Mars is a great candidate. I mean, the next rover that'll be there is going to be looking for those specific bacterial signals that are like they thought they found in 96.
Yeah. Did you ever see the Richard Carrier interviews with Ariel Avinu back a couple years ago?
When I had him on, he mentioned it.
Anyway, that was really cool. But he did one with Dr. Carrier, if I'm not mistaken, where he was talking about the whole issue of like, why are we here? Isn't the proof that we're here and the fact that we're just in the Goldilocks zone from the sun and all that, isn't that proof?
Conditional, right?
Yeah, and he talked about how like 99.999 or something percent of this universe is completely inhospitable to life. Yeah. And like if there was really a God that was all about us and humans, don't you think he would have made this a little bit more hospitable to human life?
Yeah.
Like, really? But,
why can't we breathe underwater? Why can't we fly? Why do birds, dogs, and cats have better eyesight than us?
Yeah.
Why, like why do they have better sense of smell? Why better hearing? Right? Like, why don't we hear like bats where we can actually hear sonar? Like, what's going on here? I thought we were the apex. You were made us to be like you. And if you're this omnipotent being, then you can probably breathe underwater. You can probably fly. You can probably, cut off an arm and grow it back. Right? How come he gave that ability to like worms and newts, but we can't do that?
Yeah.
Intelligent design, my ass, people.
It's amazing. Well, I know I've kept you for a long time. I want to ask you just about one last major topic, if I could, and
Sure.
We'll wind our time down. But I'll probably throw a few little questions in. But the last big topic I want to ask about that's related to what we just talked about with the shunning and so forth. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you about the idea of childhood indoctrination as abuse. Do you think that it's appropriate to call childhood indoctrination abuse, at least in the forms where they would not just say, hey, there might be a God and you should probably have good morals, but in the context where they say stuff like, there is a God, only our God is the right one, everyone else is going to burn in hell, and by the way, you yourself,
which is every religious family does that, by the way.
Yeah,
depending on whatever religion they're in, right?
Unless you're in the really progressive versions, at least of Christianity, where it's all kind of annihilationism or the Rob Bell version of Christianity. But where it's just we're all gonna God's gonna redeem everybody in the end. We'll all be in heaven together. But just in the sense of
a party, dude.
like what I mean, like especially for Christianity, and I'll start there because that's where I'm from. But you're telling everybody, and even people that are in it, if you leave it, you're gonna burn in hell. But then on top of that, you're saying to those of you who are growing up in the family of God and the covenant people, you are still, even though you're technically in the right group, you got lucky, you got blessed, you got born into the right religion, but you still have a big issue. You were born in sin, and you commit sin, so you have a lot to be very ashamed of, and you are inherently bad. And the good news is, of course, God redeems you. God gives you his righteousness. He imputes it to you, and he's the sacrificial lamb that his blood covers you. So there's good news in this, but you're still, you have to start. You can't talk about what God does for you until you start with why you need him to do this thing, this great gospel thing. And that is, you're so bad. You're so bad. And there's a lot of other aspects of it I could talk about, but do you see that as abusive, and how do you approach that topic?
At one time, I did kind of consider that, but a little bit of introspection and thinking about it over some years, I can see how it appears like it's abuse. And to some degree, it is, because it's definitely, it's funny because I grew up in a time, and a lot of the kids that were in those types of homes where they had that type of banter going on and that type of indoctrination going on, I know them now later on in life, and they're fine. You know, some of them, are a little bit scarred from minor shit, but no more so than anybody else, right? I've got scars too from my childhood, right? That's a really tough one, because I could easily sit here and say, oh yeah, that's totally abuse, but I don't really believe that. I think that that when it's done, you're born into a family that is a believing family, and they're doing what their folks did to them, whose folks did it to their folks. It's like it's something that's gone down the line for generations, and it's the norm. So no one's really thinking, and not that that's an excuse. Don't ever think that something like that is an excuse, but it's not done with malicious intent.
Right.
It's quite the opposite. It's done with the intent to demonstrate how much you love your kid because you want them to be a part of this glorious thing.
Yeah.
So there's no evil intent there. However, it can end up being problematic in the future. As you know, as we've spoken about, I've talked to people that have had issues because of that, because of indoctrination. Do I think I actually had a line in one of my songs? It's called "The Indoctrination Should Be a Crime," although that's a bit of an extreme reaction. I don't think indoctrination should be a crime, so to speak, because there are multiple different types of indoctrination. You have to be a little bit more specific too, right? Religious indoctrination, there are some versions that I think people shouldn't have full reins with, we'll say. I think that now you're talking about treading on freedoms and rights. I don't think kids should be force-fed fanatical religious belief stuff until they're old enough to actually comprehend. Because let's face it, if you're 2 years old, you don't know what a God is. You don't know any of this. You don't know what religion is. All you care about is the next time fucking Elmo comes on Sesame Street, right? Like, you don't care about that sort of stuff. So, but those are the formative years where it's the easiest to sink your teeth into them, so that they are following a specific path. Once they start hitting like 5, 6, 7 years old, now they start to sort of understand it, and they're getting a picture because it's been force-fed to them. I think kids should wait till they're of that age where they can actually comprehend what's being said to them or being taught to them, and then they should be able or be given the opportunity to make a decision whether or not they'd be interested in actually following something like that. And don't use threatening things. Well, if you don't, you're going to die and burn in hell. Like, that to me is a scare tactic, and that's where I'm like, that shit is kind of abusive. But I don't think people go through these rituals to indoctrinate the kids with evil intent. So I don't think that that's necessarily, I wouldn't call it like, there's aspects of it that I would consider to be really evil, and other parts it's just like the norm, so to speak.
I think the hard part for me is just, I think this sense of, number one, we get used to it. For example, if there's some indoctrinations that we would be very uncomfortable with immediately, like if we said, hey, there's a family down the street that is raising their kids, and every day they tell their kids Israel is the enemy, and you need to grow up and kill as many of them as you can. well,
that's
we'd be like, we got a problem. Hopefully we'd all have a problem really quick, or anything that fringe. But then there's like these levels of intermediary, where it's like it's nowhere near as extreme. It's not terroristic, but maybe it's like, you know what, hey sweetie, you get to grow up and you get to become the fourth wife of this man. He's probably gonna have about 10 wives, and you get to bear as many kids as you can for Jesus. And that's the best thing you can do, is just to be this man's best fourth wife, and to be one of the many, many wives, and to bear, 20 kids for Jesus. And you kind of say, well, is that abuse or not? That's a lot. It's not quite terrorism, because they're not going to blow anybody up. But it's if they're telling somebody that's like that's like the best life, it's very distortive. Is my point. I'm not very good at what I'm saying.
Is.
And it's like, well, we're used to certain things, and so they don't sound as bad. They sound more easy to swallow. That's what she said. And it's like, if you were like totally in a secular society, and I know we're not. This is totally made up. But if you were in a secular society, and suddenly someone makes some stuff up, like, hey, I've got this story of this guy, and it's it's really, really true. Blood magic and scapegoating and human sacrifice, and you need to eat the flesh and drink the blood. You'd be like, what in the world are you talking about? That is bizarre. And if they said in that utterly secular context, they said, well, I insist on teaching my kids this, we'd kind of all get scared, because we're so used to be like, no, secularism is, we're not going to do that to kids. We got past that. And the first person that brings all this up would be like, uh-oh, we got a big problem. It's starting again. And we'd kind of be tempted, at least I think, in that kind of society, to protect those children. But you take it out of that make-believe context, and you say, no, the real word is we're all, like, across the board, everyone's into blood magic and scapegoating and human sacrifice and this. And it's like, well, because we're all doing it, I guess it's kind of acceptable. And I feel like there's a part of me that wants to make it less acceptable. I don't know if that's a good way to put it, but like, I want to make it less acceptable in not in a crime sense, like, oh, you're going to go to prison, obviously, but in the sense of like, I want it to be so weird to people to say, I'm going to teach my kids that blood magic is necessary or going to burn in hell. And I don't know, and I think the idea of like, I use this a lot, but like in the Matrix, when Neo has been first pulled out of the pod, and he's not yet really conscious. He's just kind of in the little spaceship thing that they have, and they're remaking his body with the little needles to try to get his muscles rebuilt. And he opens his eyes for the first time. He's like, "Why do my eyes hurt?" And like, you've never used them before. And I think that just, whenever I think about that, it strikes me really hard, because I think we're raising whole generations of kids that, like, let's say at 20 or 30 or 40, they get out like I did. You realize you kind of haven't used your eyes ever. And what happens if you get to like 40, 50, 60, 70, and then you get out, you're like, nobody had the guts to tell me for 70 years that this was like, I'm 70 and I'm starting my life for the first time now, for no reason other than people just didn't tell me the truth. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's a part of me that cringes at that. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Yeah, I know. I get that, but I don't see when you said that people weren't telling me the truth. Well, they were, in a sense. They were telling you the truth that they knew, that they were raised in.
Their truth.
So they don't realize that what they're doing is, I don't call it lying. It's more like a misinformation. Like, they're misinforming you on things that people believed like thousands of years ago, and it just happened to carry on for generations, and you're now just one of the final victims of it. But,
right.
I don't know. See, I still don't think that people do this with any. Well, most people do these, indoctrinate their kids, or tell, pastors doing their sermons. I don't think they're intentionally lying to people. Well, it's actually, if you listen to Dan Barker, he had to do that for a little while before he was able to get free from it. So in a sense, I don't call that lying. It's just, well, now you're just doing what you used to do. You realize that it's nonsense, but you're not, it's one of those weird fine line things.
Yeah. But the people that have been deconverted, they're not even at that, where they're not living a double life. They truly believe it, and they truly believe that they're being loving and protective.
Yeah, of course they do. Otherwise they probably wouldn't do it. Right? So it's tough.
Could I ask then, as maybe a final wrap up, what do you think will be the best thing for atheists who are concerned about these issues and who certainly feel like there's only so much you can do? You know, we can't legislate, we can't get in people's homes and change things. We wouldn't want to, but we want to make a difference long term. We want to leave the planet better than we found it. Obviously, some people that like the very first step has to be healing. A lot of us, healing takes a long time. But once people kind of get through it, they get off, get out of the swamps of the depression of it sometimes, which happens. They think through it. They put up their appropriate boundaries with people. They get reconnected with people, and they kind of get, to be a healthy atheist, relatively speaking. Like, what would you say would be a good thing for people to start to think about, or how would they approach being able to truly make a difference on this fight? It is a bit of a fight. I mean, we don't want to be fighting, but it's a fight against falsehood.
Well, it's not like we're throwing punches, but it's definitely a battle of wits to a degree. It is a fight of some kind.
Yeah. Well, how do you advise people to kind of get involved? And obviously, it'd be different for different people, specifically. But how do you help people get in the fight a little bit?
First of all, let's point something out. Extremists are smaller in number, I think, than people really realize.
Yeah.
Fundamentalists, they're not a huge group of people. They're there and they're loud and boisterous and in your face, and that's why you see them. But they're still really just a minor percentage of the overall Christian belief system or Jewish belief system. The extremists are just smaller numbers. Okay, let them spew out their nonsense as long as they're you can yell at them, debate with them, whatever you want. But remember that most of the believers out there are just day-to-day average folks, right? They just happen to have this belief system.
Yeah.
Most of them haven't even read their holy books. Most of them don't. We all wear mixed fabrics, people. Come on. So most of them don't even keep the commandments, which they're like 600 and something of them in total, not just the popular 10 or two different versions of the popular 10. Remember that these are folks just like you and me, really. It's just we were able to shed the belief. And many of them are still in the belief system. So you can have the conversations, but talk in a way that's not condescending, and just ask them questions like the epistemological or Socratic method, as it's also known, to trigger the thinking, right? Because I often say, if you refuse to question the things that you believe, then you can really, truly not ever find out whether or not that's true. Right?
That's a good way to put it. Question your beliefs, folks. I do it constantly because I'm fed new information all the time from, well, some people I consider not to be reliable sources, but so I question stuff. And the internet is there, and if it's used as a tool properly, and it takes a bit to learn how to do that. One website I can point out to you that I started using a few years back, and no, it's not Snopes, although Snopes is pretty good for myth busting. Is the Clarivate website, which is the master journal list. So anything that's of the scientific nature, if someone comes at you, oh, they got this new thing and it's blah, 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 you can go right over to the Clarivate and start typing in words to look for that and see what kind of papers they have on it, how often or how much of it has been peer reviewed, what the current consensus is. All of that is there, and it's the Clarivate website. In the email, I'll send you the link. Thank you. I've never heard of it. I look forward to seeing that.
It's the master journal list. It's basically and all the reliable journals that they have in there. Because let's face it, there are some scientific journals that aren't exactly on the up and up. People can buy peer review, guys. So you still do a little bit of weeding through that as well. But eventually you learn how to do that. And you learn how to manipulate Google to find out the factual information rather than what they want you to think is factual information. Because everyone's really good these days at word salad, so they can make things sound all sciencey, and it's absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
Just look at Deepak Chopra. There's a perfect example right there.
So I'm guessing the forget the word already. Clarivate website probably does not have Ken Ham on it.
No, fuck no. Thankfully, no. No, the Clarivate website, they don't like ham and eggs.
That's, well, Neil, I appreciate your being willing to talk with me today.
My
Again,
pleasure, man.
Neil Bernstein, this has been great. Your story is definitely different than a lot. It feels like the longer I do this, I'm sure you'd agree that the more you hear different nuances of both people, where people are coming from and how they respond and what they did with it and how their research went. So I appreciate you sharing this, and I definitely want to say thank you. I'm sure I speak for a lot of people in saying this, but thank you for what you're doing with your channel. I'm kind of
Appreciate it.
following in your footsteps a little bit. That's a lot of what I want to do. I've got some other kind of side aspects of it that are diverging, in a slightly different path. But a lot of it is just finding people that are willing to share their stories. And I've got to say,
The more of us that are doing it, the better, because that way a lot more people that might be on the doubting side, on the fence, have more avenues to go to or stumble upon, like some people have told me about my channel.
Yeah.
So we need more guys like you and me out there doing this, where people can tell their stories, because believe me, I've gotten emails. It does help people.
It does. And also I think it's amazing too to find people that, I think a lot of atheists watch shows like yours or shows like Pine Creek's, and they feel like they're only the recipients. Like they're the passive. I tune into his channel and I listen or read this book, and it's like they're participants. And that there's probably a sense of, I don't have much to give to this. They're so much smarter. They've got this cool channel. They're so technically savvy.
Nonsense.
And it's like, and I don't go for, I mean, I do go for some scholars because I want to hear certain things, but
Sure.
I go into these, into Facebook groups, and I make friendships with people, and there's people that nobody knows, like no one knows who they are. And then I'm like, I think you got a story to tell. And I'm just putting words in people's mouths here. I don't know if this is how they feel, but I hope they feel like this sense of like, oh yeah, I have a voice in this, and I have a reason to create a platform. Maybe start with getting an interview with somebody, but then maybe I'll create my own platform, and like just empowering people's voices. It's such a cool thing.
It is. And I recommend anyone who has the capability to do that, to get out there and do that. Like my good friend John, who's is Godless Engineer, always says, and Caitlin, his wife, stand up and use your voice. Remember that.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. And
the more
everyone,
of us
even
there, the better.
And even the people that are just, all you're doing is just asking good questions. I mean, like everyone's journey, it makes a difference. So
check out Anthony Magnabosco's channel too, guys. He does a lot of the SE stuff. And Cordial Curiosity, that's Reed Nice Wonder. He does the same thing as Anthony. He sets up a little booth with a couple of microphones, and like the Change My Mind booth that you see on those memes all the time. He does something very similar to that, and people sit and talk with him. His take on it is really, really cool. He's a great guy. I've had him on the show. He's kind of laid back kind of guy. He does not like loud and boisterous like me, but he's kind of a chill dude. But he's a super nice guy, and he'll talk to you, right? And of course, Anthony, the first channel of that ilk that I stumbled on. And I was lucky enough when I was in Texas he took me for lunch at a little Mexican place, and I sat with him and author Hector Garcia, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with Hector Garcia, but he's also an author. And one of my favorite fucking books that I've read recently is by him. He's a psychologist, and he does mostly like religion psychology.
Okay.
And he wrote a book called Alpha God. Okay. You can get this on audio too. I do have it on audio as well. Really, really good, where it talks about how God seems to have a primate brain, just like the rest of us. the whole killing of infants, like especially the males, right? Because that's a primate thing, or actually it's an animal kingdom thing. Lions do it too. They kill all the infants so that their bloodline, when they take over, is the new one, right? He's very animalistic, very primate oriented, just like the rest of us, it seems, which is a big clue as to us creating God rather than the other way around.
Yeah. I'm assuming he brings in a patriarchy kind of aspect to it as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's actually, there's a whole chapter on that in here. It's a really good read. Alpha God by Hector A. Garcia. He's a unbelievably cool guy too. He was at the lunch with me and Anthony Magnabosco, and I dragged along my friend Thomas Bear, who does Off the Chain Atheists, and he designs t-shirts and stuff like that. He's
Awesome.
good people too. He was just on what the hell show was he? Oh, on Andy's show. My friend Andy's show is Laughing in Disbelief.
Nice.
He was just on his show.
Yeah. I was able to touch base with Andy. We went back and forth in our shows too a few weeks ago. So that was cool. He's a great guy.
Andy's awesome.
Yeah. Well, everyone, again, Neil, the 604 atheist. I don't know what you're going to do if you switch area codes, but
it'll stay the same.
I guess it'd be
Stay
like
true to my roots.
Yeah, exactly. Can't switch it. But Neil the 604 atheist, please go to his channel if you haven't before. Like and subscribe and show him love. And he's got a lot more videos than I do, so you'll have a lot of content there to see, pick what appeals to you. But thank you so much again, Neil, for what you do. You're a great voice in this, and I love what you're doing. So keep at it.
I'm gonna plug a few more channels, if you don't mind, that I'm involved with, if that's okay.
Yeah, please go for it.
They're already on there on the YouTubes. We haven't launched the show yet, but we do have the True North Talk YouTube channel is there. There's some really funny videos of us doing some construction stuff on there that's even got the Benny Hill music in the background.
Nice.
That my friend Peter DeTucker, who does the Herding Cat show, did that for us. He sped up the film, and it's got that like, because we look like bumbling fools. And so definitely go over and check out the True North Talk there and give us a sub over there, because you're probably going to enjoy the stuff that we're doing in the future. And I'm now an official host. Here, I'll even show you. I even have the coaster to prove it here, guys.
Nice.
Right there. So I'm one
cool.
of the official hosts of, I've been on Truth Wanted, I've been on Talk Heathen, and I'm now one of the permanent hosts, or semi-permanent hosts, because there's a bunch of us that swap in and out for the nonprofits, the relaunch of the nonprofits. And cool. The last Saturday of every month, Andy, who we were just talking about, and myself, and Seamus, who's from the Free Thought Project, Free Thought Profit Project, or whatever the hell his show is, that I've been on a couple of times. We do a little show called Atheist Drinking Out Loud. Usually it's about an hour and a half, where we have a topic, and we usually have a guest with us, and we just make fun of things and throw down a few beers while we're doing it. So it's a lot of fun, that show. So definitely check that one out too. And his channel is Laughing in Disbelief. So give him a sub too, because Andy's good people.
And you often do, like, you do the interviews with people on your channel, then you do an after show where people just hang out for a while, right? Yeah.
Those are a lot of fun. I keep hearing through people that send me messages and stuff, dude, your after parties are legendary. I'm like, really? What does that even mean? but apparently people are digging it, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times I get more people watching the after party than the original interview.
Wow, that's interesting.
But by analytics tell me that they always go down, because I always put the link to the interview in the description box, and they end up going back and watching that anyway. So so I'm getting the views from that. So that's pretty cool.
I wonder if the after party too is just reflective of the idea that we get, and I'm not trying to get open the interview again, this is just a closing thought, but we get tempted to shy away from like church, like we're Christians, at least, it's like, oh, you're done with that, so you're not trying to create an atheist church, we're done with church. No. But like the whole idea is like we need community. And exactly. I've heard Christians even attack, oh, you're just trying to create an atheist church. Like, no, we're as humans needing contact, communication. We need connection. We need relationships, and that's just such a great place to do it. And I wonder if that's just really hitting a lot of people's needs of like, yeah, we need these kind of discussions. We like, in an ideal world, if not just because of COVID, but just in the sense of needing more connections, we'd sit around a campfire at night, roast the marshmallows and drink.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah. And
before religion was even a thing, community was already there. Yeah,
exactly. And we need that so badly, especially today with all the craziness of the world, like not just talking about religion and escaping, but we need people that are balanced and rational to talk through these issues with in life. And
of course,
I think that's a great thing that you offer. You're bringing a lot of good stuff to the table, so we definitely appreciate it.
Well, when you're in one of the after parties, you can tell me what you thought of it afterwards.
Absolutely.
The reason I do the after parties is and a lot of times we get Christians that come in, like Otangelo, who starts to argue with the chat, which I get a kick out of. I think it's hysterical. I'm actually quite friendly with Otangelo for the most part. I do it to show people that, guess what? We're just people like you. It's just we just don't believe the same thing you believe. But we can all get together and have our community just like you do. But it doesn't have to be Sunday or Wednesday for us. We can do it any day of the week. And we get together and we have a good time. We have a few laughs. And we tell jokes. We poke fun at certain things we find stupid. And we just, throw a couple back and have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Just like any other community out there, we do the same thing. And it doesn't necessarily lead to this being some sort of atheist church, because like we were just saying, community and getting together around a campfire has been in the human psyche and the human practice for thousands of years, long before there were any of the gods we know of today.
Yeah, exactly. And
we are social species, and it's a necessity.
Yeah, and it's probably a good side benefit too for the Christians who might just be curious. Like, I know that when I was a Christian, the idea of being an atheist was just, it wasn't necessarily scary, although it might have been, but it's just weird. It's like atheists, like,
well,
what is that? And it's like, to get that normalcy, like, no, these are normal people. You probably sit next to some of them at work, when we could. And, it's like, these are people in the car next to you. And these are nice, normal people who would help you fix your tire on the side of the road. They're just nice people.
Which I've done.
Yeah. And it's so cool to kind of give that perspective, because it's like you almost need to start there, like to say, no, we're normal. Your kids are in our school, blah, blah, blah. We're just like you, and be like, oh, okay, so this isn't as scary. Okay, well, what's your life like?
Well,
and then you start to talk about it.
Atheists, among religious groups, atheists are painted with a pretty nasty brush. We are vilified. Yeah. And part of what we do at Canadian Atheists is to try to stop the vilification of atheism and to try and normalize it. Because you know what? Like you said, the only thing that we don't have that they have is the God belief. Other than that, we might as well be almost the same kind of person, right? Like, we do good things. We try to be charitable. I have a blood donor group, which many atheists come with me every Wednesday to go, or every 52 days to go do, like Randolph and Dave and a couple other folks. We go out and we do this, and we do it. And we actually, the blood donations now get counted for my group and for Canadian Atheists, because we tied the two together. So both groups are getting these numbers.
Nice.
So it's just to show the community, hey, we're atheists, but you know what? We're not dicks. We're actually just like you.
Yeah, good people. Yeah, good people with a lot of good things to offer. Well, I appreciate you collaborating with me today. I loved talking through some of these issues with you, and hope we can do it again sometime. And again, thank you so much for all that you do. I really appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure, man. And I'll hit you up. You're not on Twitter, are you?
I'm not, but I probably should be.
You know what? I'm now on Twitter a lot more than I am on Facebook. I find Facebook to be a lot more of a hellhole than Twitter, although Twitter has got its moments, trust me. But it's just, most of the people that I associate with in this sort of field are on Twitter rather than Facebook. So
yeah, I do need to be a little bit more broad in my digital base, for sure. Well, thank you so much again. I really appreciate it. Again, everyone, Neil, the 604 Atheist. Thank you very much.